Well, everybody, you have tuned in to a very special bonus episode. We don't even have a chapter we're going through today. We have no rules, no guide rails. We're just going to go where this goes. I don't even know how long it's going to be, but we're excited that you're joining us. My name is Jeremy. As always, I'm here with my friend Jeff.
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Does our guest recognize that line?
Oh man, it's so familiar, but I couldn't pin it. When you say it, I'm gonna freak out.
I'm trying to blank too. What is it?
Spoken by Peter Parker.
Oh
in
man,
the
I'm so disappointed right now.
Spider-Man 3.
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
I wanted to bring a Spider-Man quote because we've got a real Spider-Man fan
That
among
is so
us.
good.
There
Jeff,
it is.
That's so good. So today, in addition to not having a chapter of the Bible that we're discussing, we have a very exciting guest that we've been looking to for a while. We have had this on the books for a bit, and we're excited because we've had Christian guests before in our study through Romans. We have not had a guest on the other side of the camp yet. So tonight we're going to go there. So Jeff, would you like to introduce our guest today?
Yeah. As you said, we've had some Christian guests, and we were thinking we need an atheist, because myself, I feel like I'm a little bit of a soft atheist, wishy-washy, maybe agnostic. Who's to say? But tonight we've got a real atheist with us.
You don't fully embrace the word yet, so we need someone that fully can embrace the word.
Maybe our guest can win me over. We've got Mike Wiseman from the Bible Says What podcast. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys. Super excited. I've been listening for a while. This is a treat for me for sure. I've been very excited.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. According to the emails, you've been apparently binging through the podcast. So
absolutely,
that's great to hear. I love it.
Yeah.
So if you guys check out Michael's podcast, which we would definitely recommend, he spends a lot of time talking with Christians. And I jokingly said before we hit record that he makes cliche Christian answers sound absurd. And what's interesting is, as a Christian listening to that, you would think I would get very defensive or like, no, but. And actually, I find as I listen to your podcast, I end up agreeing with you far more because the things you're I don't know what the right word, nitpicking or pointing out, whatever. I'm like, yeah, that does sound ridiculous. And so this will be fun just to go where it goes. But I would love to know, I don't know, and I think it would be helpful, maybe context for where we're going to go with this. What's been your journey with Christianity? Just so we kind of have a framework of where have you been with it? What, what has been your background? Obviously, it'll help us understand kind of where you're at today, and then maybe provide a little framework for wherever the conversation goes.
Yeah, no, I thank you. Appreciate that. I grew up in the church. Both my parents are ordained ministers, and they do their own thing. All my brothers and sisters, everybody's in the church. I'm the only one who's not. I'm kind of the black sheep of the family in that aspect of it. But I believed I was going to be a youth pastor. I did that little puppet ministry thing at church for a while. My favorite character was Satan. He was always more fun to play. He was just more eccentric, and it was more exciting to play.
That should have alerted you to something, maybe.
Maybe it was the red. I do like red. But I started. Wow, man, there was a lot there. There was a lot of fear as far as the hellfire. A lot of that was hammered home throughout my whole life, and then. Teenage years kind of push it off aside. When you're a Christian, I don't know if you guys have been through this, but when you're a Christian and you're younger, you're like, well, I could just do this today, and then tomorrow I can confess, and then I could be forgiven the next day. Well, that's kind of what I kept doing. I just kept doing that same thing, and then before you know it, well, nothing's really happening, and I still haven't heard from this guy, this God that wants to have a relationship with me, that I'm supposed to be in a relationship with. And then I one time was talking to a friend, and they're talking about religion, and they just kind of talked a little bit differently about it than what I'd heard. Besides George Carlin. George Carlin was one of I never heard anybody talk about religion like that. That was so weird. As a kid growing up in the church, you hear George Carlin talk about religion, and it's like, whoa, there's people that think like this? Anyway, so the friend of mine started getting into the history of it and like how it just didn't add up. And I was like, So I started researching a little more, and I opened the Bible and I decided to read it, like actually read it, because when I was a kid, they teach you things, but I didn't pick it up and read it. And that's one thing my mom always told me. She says, Michael, you know your Bible, but you don't know your Bible. Well, thanks, Mom. But now I do. Now I know my Bible.
So what does she mean by that? You knew theology, or
no?
what
I knew the verses. I knew the stories, as far as what I was taught. But I didn't know the Bible. I didn't understand God. I didn't understand purposes, stuff like that. It's where she was going with that.
Okay, so it's more like abstract ideas to you.
Yeah, and so when I actually picked up and read it, I started finding all kinds of things wrong with it. I had little note cards that I started writing all these verses on. I'm like, this is a troubling verse. This is wrong. Wait a minute, what's this idea? And so I had this. They were all over my office, note cards everywhere. So I wrote a book. I was like, I'm just going to put all this together and put a book. And the Bible says what? And I started that, and then I started the podcast about the same time. So it was like, anyway. So the journey was I dived into it. I found the things wrong with it. I couldn't grapple with them. They didn't make any sense. And so that's when my belief really just went out the window. Was all that. Yeah.
So how long ago was that for you?
Woo! Doing the podcast for 5 years. That's quite a number.
Congrats.
So maybe about 15 to 20 years ago.
Man.
Yes, thanks. It's a lot of hard work, I tell you.
So there was a long period between like losing your faith before you wrote the book and started the podcast.
Yeah,
There was a period of just being an atheist, but not like with a platform with a book and podcast and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, it was more of a research part. I wouldn't use the name atheist for a minute. That was a minute before I actually started using that. Then I use the agnostic atheist, because I'm an atheist, but I haven't been convinced. So I don't know for sure. I can't give you that 100%, there's no God. I can't do that. So I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows if there is this specific guy. It could be Kali Ma. It could be Spiderman. It could be anything. But, so that's where I'm at. I don't know. And I'm a hard atheist as far as I don't know. Haven't seen the proof. There's no gods as far as I'm concerned.
So what do you think about Jeff being reluctant on this word? And he really holds to the skeptic word. He's a little slow to embrace it. You think he needs to keep going, or what do you think?
No, see, I like to use the analogy that the Christians like to use. It's his journey, and this is his journey outside of God, and that's his own personal thing, and it takes as long as you need it to take. Sometimes it takes a week. Sometimes it takes 2 years. It just depends on the journey you're on. That's where I'm at with that.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Do you see any in particular like trajectory like that your journey is headed toward, or is it kind of open-ended, or do you like, hey, I think it's taking me this direction? Is there any direction you see or no?
Well, I mean, it's taken me in the direction of being a better person. Okay. You can't do 5 years of conversations and not learn something about yourself. I mean, it's impossible. So I've learned a lot about myself. I talk a lot. I interrupt people. I'm rude sometimes. But, I'm working on all those things. I'm getting better at it. And I think with every conversation, I become a better interlocutor. I become a better podcaster. And it's fun to grow this craft. I enjoy the crap out of this. This is a blast. I talk to people from Africa. I talk to people from the Netherlands. I'm like, how is it tomorrow? Because they're in tomorrow. I would never have had this opportunity if it hadn't been for this podcast. So yeah, no, I'm growing as a person 100%, and my knowledge and my questions are getting a little bit better, I feel, with every episode.
You do have an epic voice for audio purposes. I just have to say.
Yeah.
And your beard looks great on video, but I know a lot of people may not see that right now. So just they're hearing the epicness of your voice.
Appreciate that. For years, I couldn't stand the sound of my own voice. I'm not real comfortable with it, but yeah, no, drives me nuts. Just a thing.
That's great to hear that you still feel like you're learning new things. That was something I was kind of curious about you, Mike, is because as someone who's listened to a bunch of episodes of your podcast, and yeah, I'm a fan. It's very entertaining. Sometimes it does feel repetitive. Like sometimes you tend to get caught up in the same conversations over and over again. Of course, it's always a different guest, so everyone has a slightly different interpretation of things. Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever worry that you might get bored of asking the same questions over and over again, or?
No, I love
How do
it.
you feel
Thank you.
about
That's an amazing question, because I do find myself these conversations tend to go in certain directions, like the problem of evil. That's just one of the major problems, and with that, there's like maybe 5 or 6 categories you can go to, and
Mhm.
how many can I hit in a year? I'm going to hit all 5, and then I'm going to go back through all 5. And everybody, like you said, everybody's going to have a different reaction and different a comment back. Not all of them are awesome, but that's the joy of it, is you never know what the other person's going to say. You never know how they're going to react to these questions. So I think that's the fun of it all.
How when you I'm just curious. This is kind of off topic, but it's on topic a little bit. When you are having a conversation with a Christian who's going to come on and
Hmm.
get grilled for, I
Hmm.
don't know, an hour or so, or maybe more, uh, what's the incentive for the typical Christian? Are they thinking, "Hey, I'm going to wow Michael with my answers, and he's going to have no idea how to respond"? Is it hubris, or
Yeah.
are they just like, yeah, I enjoy getting beat up for an hour? Because I literally listen. I'm like, why did they come on this? They sound ridiculous.
Some of them, you guys, it's like, thank you. Some of them, well, they'll look into the show and we'll have a conversation and they'll be like, okay, well, I know what I'm getting myself into. And then some of them will see the word Bible and then just stop reading. Those are my favorite.
I was gonna say I do get the impression that some of your guests like literally did zero research before coming on the show and didn't know
It's
what they
so
were signing up
sad.
for.
Really?
Yes. And just recently, like the episode that's coming out this week, the lady on the show, she asked me, what should I do to prepare? Well, again, let's watch a few episodes. If you have any questions for me, let me know. All these different things. She gets on. Yeah, I didn't watch any episodes. I had no idea what I was getting
Oh
myself into.
no!
It's like, come on, guys.
Oh, no.
I give you links, everything. Everything is there for you.
I'm gonna guess that didn't go well for her.
Well, it was still a good conversation. She felt a little embarrassed at the end of it, but I think she did fine. So
I gotta say, my personal favorite episode probably of yours is the one where I don't remember the name of the guest, but she was like a worship leader for Bethel Music, I believe, where she was promoting some book, and then her publicist jumped on and tried to kind of get weasel his way out of the conversation, or just cancel. Maybe weasel's too strong of a word, but say like, you know what? Actually, we want to just cut this interview short. This is not going well.
that was the best.
That was a great moment in radio. Yeah.
Yeah. Just having a conversation, it's just me and her. All of a sudden, this third dude pops up. I'm like, okay. And it doesn't say anything. It just sits there. And I'm like, I'm not really sure what's going on. Then all of a sudden, I'm like, dude, you're in the show, right? And he's trying to interrupt the questions, make them softball questions. He knows his ass is in a lot of trouble. That's why he was there.
Well, they're just trying to sell books. Yeah. They're trying to sell books. They realize, oh, this is going to be bad for business.
That's not
amazing.
the conversation we wanted to have. No, it's
Yeah.
still fun
so
though. I'm polite with it. We try and banter back and forth. I try and make it as light as possible because these are tough questions and these are tough topics to tackle for sure. So I try.
One of the things I've noticed about you is you laugh a lot. You're doing it right now, but you laugh a lot on your podcast as well, even when things are a little tense between you and a guest. How do you think laughter helps these kind of conversations?
Man, it definitely breaks the ice. And it helps me too, because these are these are not easy things to ask and talk about. So if I make it a little more lighthearted, it's not as harsh, it's not as much of an attack. Because a lot of times these questions are seen as an attack. And they're just basic things. Why did God create Satan? I mean, that's a basic question. Don't get mad. Don't tell me you can't explain it. Just, calm down. Let's have a conversation. I don't know. Just simple things like that sometimes.
Yeah, that's something I like about the show. Is that you take all types of guests, from like really academic apologist types, but you also seem to have a lot of people who are just normal Christians. Like, they remind me of like the types of conversations I would have with like my family members or something like that, where they don't have these kind of like highly educated academic answers. They're just kind of like, trying to regurgitate things they've heard in church, or they're honestly like struggling to come up with an answer in real time. Like, sometimes they haven't like thought of these types of questions before. And I think that's a fascinating case study, because there's so much content on the internet of like highly educated apologist versus like an academic anti-theist
Mhm.
kind of thing. So I like that your show tackles like a wider variety of types of people and personalities.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't shy away from anybody. You believe in God and the Bible? Let's have a conversation. Come on my show. I mean, yeah, there was even a time I was out of guests. I had like 3 cancel in a week. It was ridiculous. Like I was like, well, crap. Now what am I going to do? So I'm online. I'm like, all right, anybody want to have a conversation? Going to all the Christian chat groups and everything. That was kind of a mistake. Plus, I had an extra beer I probably shouldn't have, which made me a little more aggressive. And the whole, it was just it was a, it was a shit show. Well, I enjoyed the conversation, and it's episode 2 something at this point. I don't know. It's out there. I don't shy away. I make mistakes 24/7. I 100% make mistakes, and I just let that show on the podcast. If I make a mistake, it's in there. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, so
take
just to
that.
talk shop. So you don't edit at all? Is that right? You just put stuff up as is?
Pretty much. I mean, the beginning and the end, I'll edit out. Like sometimes there's a beginning conversation that I'll have with the guest. Any questions before we get started? This is what I'm going to say. Are you ready for this? Blah, 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 blah. And in the end, sometimes they'll stay on a little bit afterwards and we'll just have a little bit after closing conversation. So those pretty much the only editing besides my intros and my outros and the music and how it goes.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Getting it all in there.
So I'm curious, Jeff, you just brought up conversations like with your family, and Jeff brings up his family a lot of like real life ways that these conversations often play out, because the way we talk about in the podcast is kind of in one vein of thought, and then you talk to other people and it takes on a very different tone. I'm curious, like what when you went on this own journey, I'm assuming both your parents are still in ministry. You've got to have some dicey family dynamics, I would suspect. Like, don't go anywhere you're not comfortable, but I'd just love to hear, how has that been for you? Has that been really hard? Has that, is that something you guys had to work through as a family?
Yeah. Well, it's an eggshell type thing. I don't talk about it. I don't talk about it with my parents at all. Especially my grandparents, and that topic will never ever come up with them. They're just too old at this point, and they'll never understand anything at that. Well, plus the dementia doesn't help. But my parents, eventually, I'll have that conversation. I'm not ready. I like where we're at. We've had some rocky things in my life, so I like where we're at, and I don't want to ruin it. So that's kind of where I'm going to stay with that. But my little brother, I've had talks with him. I don't think he wants to talk to me anymore about it. But it's hard. It's really hard to get. I'm not comfortable with it, and again, everybody's on their journey. Everybody's waiting for that specific time and in their own timing and whatnot. So yeah, eventually I'll have it. I'm just a kind of a coward when it comes to that.
That's a very surprising answer. So are you saying they don't know where you're at, or they know but you just don't go into it with them?
Right. We've never had
are
that.
They aware of your show?
They have to at some point. I mean, I'm all over TikTok and YouTube.
Like you haven't told them, but you just assume.
No.
This is fascinating. You are like so well spoken in this category, and I'm a little surprised by this answer.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've had a rocky relationship, and we're in a good spot. And I get it. I don't want to ruin it. That's kind of my only.
But I think that's a very real challenge a lot of people can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Not even necessarily I become an atheist, but like I don't want to be the kind of Christian I was raised to be. That can be a very dicey conversation, right? And so I even think that there's been times with people who I'm very close with where I'm still a Christian, but I'm not the kind of Christian I used to be. And there's a lot of things I believed growing up that I don't believe anymore. Yeah. And that can be a very relationally tense thing when you're like, yes, I understand we used to share this belief in common and now we don't share it. And so we're going to have to figure out, how do we exist together, acknowledging these things that are very significant, to believe or not believe are different.
And I'm actively talking against it at this point. So I think that's the limit there, a little bit over. Having that conversation is one thing, but what do I do? I'm an atheist author and podcaster at this point. So I mean, that's a little bit different. Taking it to that next level.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I'd love to hear you've grown up in Christianity, so I would guess like Jeff, you've heard all the you've heard all the things, so it's not I'm an atheist because I don't know better. It's like I'm an atheist because I choose this,
Yes.
and I could choose something else. What do you think about Jesus? Like, if is this just a historical person? Is this a make believe person? Someone asked you, Michael, what's your take on Jesus? What would you say?
Love it. Great question. Jesus, fictional character, real guy? I don't know. And if I told you one way or the other, I'd be lying because how are we supposed to know? No cameras. And he didn't write anything down, so that makes it even harder.
Well, he wrote in the dirt, apparently.
It's true.
We don't have that. That has not made it through the time.
Nobody snapped a picture of that though.
Yeah, no, we don't have that.
So I mean, he sounds like a nice guy in theory, but when you think about it, Jesus is God. God is Jesus. They're the same exact person. So everything that God is doing, Jesus is doing. So I don't care how much he tells you to love your neighbor. He's drowning children. He's telling you to get your slaves from your neighbors. All these different things that God did, that Jesus did, because they're the same person. So as far as Jesus, he's a nice, happy little guru, but when deep down, he's a tyrannical monster as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. So you don't buy it. You don't buy the good Jesus.
I don't. And the funny thing is that love your neighbors one is like a really good one. I agree. Love your neighbor is a great idea. But Jesus didn't come up with it.
Yeah.
That wasn't his idea. He took it from other people, and those people took it from other people, and it's just common sense. This is where we boil down to, if you want to have a society where people aren't slaughtering each other, we're going to have to love our neighbor. We're going to have to help other people do better. It's just basic. I mean, I don't need Jesus to tell me that. I could figure that out on my own as well,
Sure. So, Michael, when I listen to your podcast, you seem very comfortable in your atheism or whatever, whatever you want to call it. You seem content. You seem like you've worked this through. You've got answers that, again, you reference making you into a better version of yourself. So then I go, okay, well, if you found something that's good, what's the interest for you? What's the appeal for you to keep going back to this pool of Christianity, going back to getting these answers over and over again, especially as we've acknowledged some of these answers aren't articulated well. So it's not like you're getting time to, you get to interview the top 10 living theologians over and over, and they're giving you the best that Christianity has to offer. Some of these are not great answers. I would just say that as a Christian listening to some of these episodes, they're not great answers. So what's the draw for you? You found something good. You seem content. Why do you want to keep going to this well and spending all this time talking to Christians about Christianity?
Great question. No, I love talking to people. I love the uniqueness of each answer from different people. Everybody's lived a different life. Everybody has different answers to things. That's number one. Number two, I want to understand. This is something somebody has dedicated their entire life to. This is their whole world, and they think it's true. Well, how is it true? Make it make sense to me, because Christianity to me does not make sense. And that's half of it, is I want to understand, why are Christians so devout to a documented child killer? Why do they love him so much? What is the reason? I got all kinds of questions. I mean, how does the Bible make sense to them? Because to me, when I pick up that thing, it doesn't add up. There's so many flaws. So how does it make sense to you? Stuff like that. And then one of my favorite guests was an anonymous guest. He has his podcast and he does his own thing where he says he challenges his beliefs. That's his thing. That's a big old thing. Oh, bring it on. I've got this. Well, he comes on my show and he can't answer the first question. He spends 5 minutes trying to not answer it, and then the rest of the couple minutes, and then he hangs up. And I was like,
he hangs up?
He hung up on me. I was like, are you kidding me right now? You have a show about defending your truth. You come on my show and you don't even last 10 minutes. Like, I couldn't even believe it. It was great. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what they're going to say or do. No, I love it. It's great.
So this is where I would say you and Jeff seem very similar to me in this, where you both have found something outside of it, but you can't quit it. You keep going back for more.
Well, it's something I know too. I grew up in this, so I'm very familiar with it. And everywhere I go, it's here. Like, there's a billboard down the street telling me I'm going to go to hell. There's a billboard over here that tells me every baby's life is precious, but we're not going to pay for welfare or anything later. That kind of thing. It's everywhere. I feel if I don't address it, if I have this knowledge of things and I don't address it, I'm doing a disservice to humanity. I have to say something. I have to do something. I have to question it. I will not go quietly into the night. I don't know if you do you know that one, Jeff? What's that from?
Yeah,
We
from
will not go
Interstellar.
quietly into the night.
No, it's
Independence
a
Day, the
quote.
best book.
Who said that? I know that Michael Caine keeps quoting it over and over
That's
again
good.
in
Bill
Christopher Nolan's
Pullman,
Interstellar.
Independence Day, when he's giving that speech, that speech at the end there.
Oh,
We will
wow.
celebrate our Independence Day. We will not go quietly into the night. I love that. Such a great speech. Best president speech ever.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So would
that-
We watch it.
Oh, go Jeff.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's something where I do feel a little bit differently than Mike in that sense of like, I do question all the time of like, is this even a good use of my time? Should I be pursuing this? You know, I personally am still very curious about it. I would say personally, I don't feel settled. Like, similar to Mike, I guess I'm curious about, why do people believe this stuff? There's so many things that don't make sense. So it's like, I like to ask people, make it make sense. And it's interesting to hear how people respond. I don't totally resonate with the idea of like, I can't avoid it. Maybe I sort of can avoid it. Like, I like to talk about my family a lot because my family is very religious. Many of them like literally work in church, or like my brother-in-law is going to seminary right now. So we can get into it with like theological debates and stuff. And that's fun, but it's like, it's easy enough to avoid it, like you avoid it with your family, Mike, right?
Yeah.
Like oftentimes it's like we'll talk about it like all the way in the car, and then like we get to my parents' house and it's like, all right, well, let's change the subject so that we can have a nice dinner and not ruin things. So I don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like I'm more game to have these conversations than a lot of the Christians in my life. They're perfectly content to talk about just their kids and their jobs and stuff like that.
Very good. I think you nailed it there. They're very content not talking about it. But the problem I have though is they do talk about it constantly. And it's like, I mean, down to the point where Jesus knows my schedule. It's like, man, that is a phrase. And I'm going to bite my tongue. I'm not going to say anything, or somebody sneezes. It's the devil. He's getting at you. It's like, oh, come on, man. It's just a cold. We can give some medicine. We can use some modern medicine here and help. I don't know. Just little things like that. I can't escape it. That's just my world.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you can, man. That's good. It's everywhere for me.
Yeah. Well, it's sounding like our families maybe are at a different place, or like a different level of intensity or something like that. Just to share about myself, like I was very nervous to kind of tell my parents and like talk to some of my more conservative family members about it. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised with how open and supportive they were, relative
That's
to what I was picturing anyway. I mean, they were sad to hear it's not good news for them, and I'm sure a lot of them are praying for me and stuff like that. But yeah,
Guaranteed.
they're more open and willing to hear me out than I was expecting. And a lot of them are kind of like just not really interested in having the debate. Like if we get into it just for 5 minutes, and I can list off like 5 objections of like, here's why these things don't make sense to me, and they don't try to push back. They're like, yep, I hear you. I hear why that doesn't make sense. So what's for dinner? Well, okay, another kind of personal question for you, Mike. Do you ever question this decision, like as an internet personality, as a content creator? This is something I think about all the time because I kind of have different sides of myself, right? Like I'm an illustrator, graphic designer, as kind of my day job, and I make a bunch of like content about that on the internet, and that's like very fun and likable and agreeable, and everyone's a fan, And then there's this other side of me that's, for whatever reason, feeling drawn to become an internet atheist, which is a very cringe and not fun to talk about and not popular opinion with a lot of my friends and family. Do you ever feel regret or like question, like, is this really what I should be doing with my time or my creative output?
Oh man, no, yeah. There's doubt. 100% there's doubt. I could be spending time with my family. I could be VRing. I could be doing anything else. I mean, there's a lot of things I could be spending my time on. But again, it just goes back to I'm enjoying myself. So as long as I'm enjoying myself, then I'm going to continue to do it. The moment it becomes too much work and too hard, well, okay, there's been moments. but continuously too much work and too hard, then
Yeah.
I'll question. I'll get to that point. Um, man, no. Again, I feel it needs to be done. If I'm not doing this, I'm going to be going stir crazy and wanting to be doing this.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've had those doubts in the past. I think most of them have been pushed aside, and it's just straightforward, gung ho. Let's just have some fun. Let's keep going. So
Yeah. No, I resonate with that too. Like as I just said, I have doubts about like, is this a great use of my time? Which is still kind
yeah,
of an open question. But literally just every time I get together and do an episode with Jeremy, like legitimately, I just have so much fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy like engaging with these ideas, even just like the
hmm
process of editing and uploading and like rethinking of all the things I should have said when I'm listening back to the episode after the fact.
oh yeah.
Uh
Oh, that's the worst. Just
yeah,
listening
it's
back to it, going, "Oh, why didn't you say that?"
why did I say
Oh,
that? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Can we follow up
that's
this
a
time? It's like, nope, we're on to the next chapter.
well, that's good too, because you got the same guy you can come back to and follow up with that question, though. I
Right.
don't have that most of the time. I've had one guest was 4 times. That was probably my highest amount. But again, with
Mhm.
the being an internet atheist thing, yeah, wow. So the thing I you don't really think about too much is you've got right now I've got what 207 podcasts out there. That's 207 hours of me screwing up, saying things wrong, all these different things. And you if you think about it too much, it'll drive you crazy. Yes, I think it's a definite good good time spent. I've met people across the world, people I would never have met before. There's a lady in the UK that I still talk to constantly. It takes us months to get back to each other, but we still write back and forth. Elle Edwards, she was on one of my episodes there.
Oh
I'm sure
yeah.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
two of them actually. Great lady. Talks to
She's well
Jesus.
spoken.
Yes, yes. No, she's very one of my favorite guests. Honestly, she's a really awesome person in real life. Not one of those. I'm a podcast person. Yeah. So flaws. Yes, there are flaws in what I do. I let them stay as far as in the podcast uh, episodes and whatnot. Because as far as I'm concerned, a raw conversation is better than a chopped up, edited conversation to make everybody sound great. Whatever it is.
Mhm.
If I've said something wrong, I'm just gonna let it go. Just it's half the fun if I sneeze or we say something ridiculous. I've said some ridiculous things and I've just let it go. I'm not even gonna edit that out and just keep going. Oh man, farting on people in heaven. I think we talked about that at one time on the show. Just let it go.
Yeah, just see where it goes. Love it. Or Mike, do you
Uh,
have questions for us you'd like to get to?
Yes, I definitely have questions for you.
well, I have more
Definitely.
for Mike, but let's give Mike some space.
Yeah, I kind
Yeah.
of want to do the whole
Hit
thing.
us.
Yeah, 100%. So why did you guys start this show? What made you decide to do this? Because this is awesome. These conversations are great.
Oh, thank you.
Jeff, you wanna
Yeah,
go there?
it was my idea. I mean, I'd wanted to start a podcast just in general for years. Like I had a couple of like kind of false starts where I tried to start a podcast with other friends, like talking about movies and stuff, and we just
Mm,
couldn't keep the momentum going. Another reason I picked Jeremy or approached Jeremy to do this was because I knew he's a very disciplined person who would take it seriously.
nice.
And
That's good to find. Yeah.
Jeremy and I had worked at a church together before, so we were both like Christians working in this Christian space for many
The plot
years.
thickens. Oh man.
Oh yeah, you didn't know this backstory. So we went our separate ways career wise a while ago. I actually when I was kind of deconstructing, losing my faith, I actually reached out to Jeremy and asked him if I could call him up and just talk to him about some of my questions and he was kind
Awesome.
of Jeremy. I don't know if you know this. You were kind of the first person that I approached, other than my wife and some close friends, maybe. In
Hmm.
terms of saying like I don't think God is real. I'm not sure. I was kind of deciding if I should quit my job or not. Kind of a crisis of faith. And Jeremy was a true friend. He heard me out. He was very supportive. He answered my questions. He appreciated my perspective and my objections to Christianity, my problems with it. And then it was we sort of continued to talk, just DM each other on Instagram and stuff like that. And it was a couple years after that conversation, maybe a year and a half or so, that I approached him and said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" Because I kind of left Christianity behind, but I'm still curious. I'm still interested. I've got all these questions. I kind of want to read through the Bible again because, like you, Mike, I had read through the Bible as a Christian, and it didn't help. It made things worse. It made me see, so many of the flaws that you point out of like God seems like a moral monster, and more often than not. So, what's the deal? Why aren't people talking about this?
Right.
So yeah, I wanted.
Am I the only one seeing this? I mean, yeah.
yeah. So that's my side of the story. How about you, Jeremy?
That's awesome.
So I've thought about, I was, in ministry, and I was a lead pastor for a while. And so I was preaching almost every week. And so the thought of a podcast on top of, preaching sermons every week was like, I don't have the time or the energy, to do one more thing. So I kind of always put it off. And then, last few years, I don't work out at church anymore. And so, it's like, all right, I have more space now, creatively to offer something. But I wanted to find something I would really get excited about, and not just like in a short run, but like what would it continually be exciting for me? And literally it was like the easiest sell ever. Jeff's like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What if we read the Bible together? I just like talk about why I think it sounds weird, and then you offer how you make sense of it. And we just kind of like let that space. And to me, that's very meaningful, because where I actually got in trouble as a pastor I would say things from the pulpit like, hey, I'm going to preach a text today that's pretty controversial in the Christian community. I'm going to give you the way that makes the most sense to me. But there'd be plenty of other Christians who would argue a very different interpretation than the one you're going to hear today. I'm not saying that they're all wrong and I'm right. I'm just saying this is the way I make sense of it. And so I'm going to offer that to you. And people didn't like that, some people, because they're like, no, just preach the truth. And it's like, well, I don't know. I'm just preaching the way that I'm making sense of this, and, kind of humbly offering it. Like, if it helps, if it works, great. And if not, take whatever works better for you. Like, to me, it's like, yeah, go with that. But if I could offer something that might be helpful, and, I definitely am, I'm the kind of Christian, this is why, I like talking to Jeff. I like, your podcast, Michael. It's like, I like the hard issues, and I think you have to spend time on them. And I would say, I think you can still land with Jesus at the end of it. But it takes work. And, there's definitely really good objections to Christianity that I would just say, yes, that's a good objection. Like, I don't even want to like refute it. I just want to like acknowledge, yes. Like, in like one of the analogies, I think Michael, you were talking about this on, I listened to a whole bunch of things, so I'm trying to remember where I heard this, but I think it was one of yours where you were talking about the image of the Bible is like God letting his kids write the book. Was that from one of your episodes?
Yeah.
That analogy of like, okay, this is like a dad letting his kids write his biography, or or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the point being, no reasonable adult would do that. Why would God, right?
No,
and I actually
them at all.
I heard that analogy, and I was like, that's a great opposition to the Bible. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't rush to defend it. I just like, my first reaction is, yeah, I totally resonate with that objection. Like, I agree. And I have this, and I try to just sit in that and like, all right, Jesus, that's a pretty good point. You know what I mean? Like, let's figure that out, because I kind of agree with them on that one. And so to me, I've always been comfortable with that, where, I've taken apart so many things that I used to believe, and have kind of restructured it now, where it's like, I don't get worked up over a lot. Someone disagrees with me, I don't lose sleep over it. I don't feel the need to convert anybody to make anyone agree with me. I don't feel like I am unsettled if someone else doesn't acknowledge, and agree with me. And I think a lot of Christians are. So I love these conversations. I love the space. And, we went through the book of Hebrews first, then season 2, we did Romans, and we've started bringing guests in to season 2. And it's been really fun, a little bit of the flavor of what you get, where we pick, someone that may be like, hey, this person might have an interesting insight into this chapter, and it's been really fun to just see where those conversations go, and to explore how we see things different. And I learned a ton, and I love the space, and it's been really fun. And I think we have offered some encouragement to people even Christians or non-Christians, but people who are just acknowledging that these are deep questions and these are tough questions. And the fact that you know, people like us are spending time like, hey, let's talk about it, validates people who say this stuff matters. And like, I can't, like for me now, if someone's like, hey, you have to believe, you know, eternal conscious torment view of hell, or else you can't be Christian. I literally would just say like, then count me out. Like I'm out, you know, because like I just can't.
Jeremy's not a real Christian. That's what it is. That's all it is.
Well, but I hear that all the time in a lot of the circles I'm in. Or the latest thing is they'll quote something that we'll say on our podcast and use it against me. That happens a lot. I got in trouble, Michael. You'll enjoy this. I was preaching. I was guest preaching at a church. I had to travel for it. I ended up on a Thursday before the weekend doing a pastors gathering of all the pastors in the city got together, and they this is their mistake. They invited me to like, hey, from like what I see in like, you know, the deconstructing community and beyond, like what would I want to say to these pastors? So I just said like, here's where I think we have an opportunity. Here's where I think we're missing it, and really offered it up there, and it didn't go well. And, you know, basically a couple of them were like, we don't need to change our posture. We don't need to, you know, we don't need to coddle anybody. You know, this is the way it's always been. Keep preaching truth and they'll come to you. And just like this, like this posture, I fundamentally can't stand, you know? So I just get into it with them. Like I channeled you, you know, I just like right in the moment, I just start like holding their feet to the fire. Like, what about this? What about this? What is this? And I made the point, like, do you think that there's only one explanation to every challenging Bible passage? And his answer was yes. And I just said, look around the room at how many different denominations are represented in this room. Like, that's the stuff where I look at these Christians and I go, you sound ridiculous. And so, you know, they ended up going back, listening to Romans 1, where I argued a very non-traditionally Christian argument of Romans 1 for Paul, and used that against me and tried to get me to get uninvited to preach at that church that weekend. And so the church's elders had to get involved. I mean, it was this whole mess, all because I was, you know, trying to say something that's outside of the traditional norm. And so to me, I feel kind of like you, like, but I feel it on behalf of Christians. Like, we need to offer better ways of navigating this than the Hobby Lobby, you know, just pray it and believe it. Like, we've got to offer intellectually honest and thoughtful and, you know, like, and making space for these conversations. And I just don't think a lot of Christianity does. And so to me, that's why this space is so meaningful.
Absolutely. And I commend you for being in this space and speaking your mind and doing what you're doing. That's awesome. It's hard to get Christians to actually have that conversation, and you are more than willing to have that conversation, even with your own. And that's awesome. I love that. I think that's so cool. I think the more we do that, the more I see again, but we're on the opposite sides of the fence. But I think the more we'll think, the more we'll think for ourselves and do better as a species. Now, whether that's with Jesus or without, that's a whole nother topic right there. But no, that's awesome.
When Jeremy was talking, it reminded me of how like sometimes people have that complaint or just comment about the show of like Jeff and Jeremy seem so similar. Like, you know, I feel like maybe sometimes we fall into that trap a little bit too much of like Jeremy and I can both kind of just like agree on like how conservative Christians are being ridiculous or closed-minded or whatever. You know, so I try to like steer the conversation away from that as much as I can, because to me that just seems like the easiest thing in the world to complain about conservative evangelicals. You know, it's like, let's try to explore some of the ideas in the Bible and stuff like that. Do you ever get a chance to speak in Christian spaces, Mike? That's another thing I think about, is like how I'm assuming your audience is predominantly atheist, though I don't know for sure. And I feel like our podcast, our audience seems to be more Christian leaning. However, possibly more like progressive and deconstructing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a mixed bag, honestly. I got Christian, atheist. It is majority atheist from what I've seen. I don't have like a chart that does the demographics, but from what I'm hearing, it's a mixture of both. I even hear from Islamists, Muslim. Good grief! I hear Muslims, atheists. You got your skeptics. You got your just freshly out of the church or freshly in the church. Thinking they can take on every question that comes at them. I got all of them. All of them. It's a lot of fun. But as far as speaking in Christian spaces, I just recently, a couple weeks ago, came back from San Jose. The Western Seminary Conference flew me out there to go speak at a church. I'm still waiting for the recording. I'm not sure what's going on with that. But it was amazing. I've never done anything like that. And I would love to do it again because I was actually more comfortable than I thought I was going to be. But I was able to grievances and pour them out and get what I wanted to say. And they were like, great, thank you. And I'm like, that was not what I was expecting at all.
They let you speak your piece. They didn't try to shut you up or anything.
No, it was great. I got 15 minutes and I had something written out. So I said it and all the questions came afterwards. Because it's essentially, it's my why I'm not a Christian speech. And it hits all those main topics and Bible verses to back them up and logic behind it. So, there were a lot of people afterwards that were very thankful for me being there. Even the people that put it on were thankful for me. Did you hear what I just said, though? Are you sure you were here?
Are you sure you're thankful?
I love it. Super nice people, though. Again, I've met some of the most amazing people just doing this. And I don't know. It's so unique. And I'm so very privileged to be doing this, for sure.
I think that's cool that you got invited to do that.
Me too. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it.
Listening to that when that comes out.
Yes, me too. Yeah, I'd like to watch it. See how.
Do moments like that? Do they give you any sense of like, hey, maybe there is some good in this Christian thing, or is it not enough?
Oh, well, see, okay, I love that. Great question. I think there are good Christians. Oop, there we go. I think there are good Christians, but they just believe some absurd things, some things that are not rational or logical. That's just where I'm at. Again, like my family, my entire family is religious. I love my family. I'm just, there it is. The love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. I love the believer, but I hate that belief. I'm not a big fan of it at all. So that's where I'm at. I love using that one. That's yeah.
So you've hijacked evangelical Christianity to your own purposes. I like it.
Yes. Excellent. Yeah, no, 100%. There's a lot of things that Christians use that are very useful, like the seed, planting a seed. If I can plant a seed of doubt in somebody, just that little bit, and maybe it'll grow somewhere along the line. They'll hear another question. They're like, well, that doesn't make sense either. Then they'll open their Bible and, well, that doesn't make sense. And then they'll pray and nothing happens. And they'll be like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then somebody who's an amazing person will die and go to hell. And, well, that doesn't make sense. Just that little bit. That's my hope. That I'll plant a seed of doubt and this conversation will grow and they'll go from there. Think for themselves. Do the research. At the end of every podcast, I say, would you kindly pick up your Bibles and read them? Please. Do it. See what's in there.
Yeah, I love it. You have a real don't take my word for it, look it up for yourself attitude with that, which is cool.
Yeah, no, 100%. Any of these verses, I'm pretty sure I'm not taking them out of context. I've done my research, but please read it for yourself. anything that I say, oh my God, yeah. If I give you any facts, please look it up. Double check.
But that's what I think is so cool, Michael, is that, while we would be on opposite ends of, the belief spectrum or whatever you want to call it.
That belief fence there.
Sure. We might be on other sides of it, but I would say our posture is essentially the same posture. And now I think where Jeff and I get assumed that we agree is really because our posture of doubt and working through and challenging things is the same.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't always land, with the same, but we have that same fundamental starting point of, we're not just going to assume that makes sense. We're going to question it and work through it and talk through it. And I listen to you and I go, man, I would encourage every Christian to have the posture you have. And yes, it would push them to read their Bible. And I think most Christians, they read their Bible in church when it's told to them of how they should understand it, right? And they don't go home and go, hold on a second. What are other ways of understanding that verse. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're not doing that, or the majority are not doing that kind of work. And the ones that are listening to podcasts like yours and ours and trying to go, hey, are there other ways to like make sense of this? Because this is super weird. And that's what's so cool to me is like when I hear people going, wow, I had never thought about that angle or that question, or yeah, that's a really good, what argument. I think it fundamentally makes all of it better. And so my last question I would just land with, because I think this is what I'm most intrigued by all of this going is you mentioned at the beginning, you think you are a better person, or however you worded it, because of what you believe today. I would say, I think I'm a better person because of what I believe and who Jesus, is to me. But I would love to hear, tell us more, because I've heard that argument, numerous people who have left Christianity and said, I'm a better person because of it. That's something I think the church collectively needs to sit with and just listen deeply and go, okay, if people are telling us they have to leave this to be better versions of them, something has horrifically gone wrong. So I would love to hear from you. How does that work for you? How does not believing this and believing whatever you would say you believe now, how does that practically, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, no, great question. First off, less judgmental. I was a very judgmental Christian, 100%. I was pretty bad. That's number one. Number two, I'm believing things that are true. I'm not just going to accept something because somebody said it or because a feeling that I have. These tingles aren't evidence of an actual being, things like that. It just more true, more honest to myself and the world around me. Oh man, better person. As far as conversing with people, number one, I can actually have a conversation with somebody without stuttering over my own words most of the time. These are things I've learned through my podcast and how to talk and how to interact with people, how to bring up difficult questions. A lot of it's come from kids. Raising my kids, you always have to have that conversation. You have to have a lecture every 10 minutes. It's a lecture. It's just usually the same lecture. So you've learned how to have these conversations, make things better, make people more comfortable talking about these things. All of those, I'd be definitely a better person. Definitely.
Okay. So just to push a little bit,
Yes.
It seems like most of those you could have done as a Christian.
Well, see, the problem with that is I relied a lot on again, Jeremy, don't take any offense to anything I say, my invisible friend. That's what he was.
I won't let you offend me. Don't worry.
Good. I always have to say that just in case. Because he was an invisible friend. That's all he was to me. I mean, just the same as when I was a kid, I used to pretend, I don't know if you guys ever watched Dino Riders when you were a kid, but man, that show was it for me. These dudes that rode dinosaurs around. Dino Riders. Oh, it was great.
Yeah,
80s
I'm familiar
cartoon.
with the box art, but
I was into
it was a little
He-Man
bit before my time.
Oh, I wasn't allowed to watch He-Man. It was evil. But that's beside the point. These were all just invisible friends to me. And when I realized that, when all that came to be, I don't even remember what the question was at this point, but that's what that was to me. It was an invisible friend. I kind of pushed it aside, and this person's not talking to me. These conversations going on in my head are just my own thoughts. And I get that a lot now. Elle, that one lady, super nice lady, she wanted me to do an experiment. Talk to God, just talk to God. Okay, well, I did that. I had a conversation with God in my head. It was just me. And God said, well, here I am, Michael. You have anything to say? And I said, I don't know if you guys remember this episode.
Yeah.
But I told him, I said,
this is the Spiderman deal, right?
Yeah, that's that one. Yeah. I said, I'm not going to worship a documented child killer. Why did you drown all those kids? And he said, because I wanted to. Well, is there any other answer that God could give? No. I mean, he wanted to. If he didn't want to, he wouldn't have drowned all the puppies and the kittens and the children. He wouldn't have. So he's got to go. I got to find somebody that's a bit nicer. And Spiderman comes in. Spiderman says, be yourself. Great power comes great responsibility. Oh, man, I like this guy. He's a lot better. He doesn't drown any children, first off. So that's who I talk to now. I talk to Spider-Man. And it's kind of fun interacting with people on the show. I talk to Spider-Man. Well, I talk to God. Well, that's fun.
Okay, well, so this is a great topic that Jeremy and I have touched on a little bit, right? Because Jeremy, you're a big proponent of the prophetic imagination, right? That's like one of your favorite books of all time. You've read it a bunch of times, and this was like this idea of prophetic imagination, using your imaginative prayer, using your imagination to talk to God. This was something I was a little bit familiar with. Like as a Christian, people would talk about it, and it seemed, there was a time when it seemed like this really heady, kind of intellectual, cool, kind of spiritual woo-woo thing within Christianity.
Yeah.
Now as a more skeptical non-believer, maybe even atheist, it kind of seems like Christians admitting that none of this is real, that Christianity really, that Jesus is your invisible friend or your imaginary friend.
Yeah.
But Jeremy, yeah, tell us your version of that. What's the deal with the imaginative prayer, prophetic imagination? Why is that
Yeah.
meaningful for you?
Okay, so you're mixing concepts a little bit. Prophetic imagination is not the prayer part. So you're talking about what's called cataphatic prayer is the spiritual phrase of it, or imaginative prayer is kind of like the common lingo. But it's the idea. It's a type of prayer. This has been going on for centuries, where you, rather than more of a transactional, I say something, God says something, or I listen, God says something, I say something, that kind of way we often talk about prayer. It's inviting God into your imagination and saying, okay, I'm going to calm my mind. I'm going to calm myself. I'm going to allow God to influence that. It's often used in counseling is where I've seen it. And a lot of people are surprised by this, but Christian counselors probably primarily will have people go back to traumatic memories in their life. And they'll get them to literally imagine, okay, so you were 7 and your dad hit you. Where were you sitting in your room? And they'll literally get them to because you can remember these things, right? And so you go, I was on the end of my bed, and then, my door was over there, and so they'll get you to go back to that space, and then they'll ask you the question, where was Jesus? Stop in that memory and look around and try to figure out, and then, see if you can discover Jesus. And so here's the deal. I understand this sounds hella weird. I get it. I can see Michael's gears are turning. I get it. Can I prove any of this? Not at all. Could I be 100% wrong? Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
However, I would say I have had a few experiences that could be me talking to me. 100% could be. They have felt more than that to me. That could be me as well. But they have produced something good. And, I think it was our last guest, Kevin Garcia, said, at the end of the day, you're talking about mysticism stuff. Who cares if it's weird or if it's not real, if it produces something good in my life, was his argument. So I thought,
it's
kind of a
reminding
cool
me
argument.
of what Kevin, our last guest, talked about when I was kind of pushing him on, because he was talking about using drugs to encounter God. And I was like, for me, that seems like it's clear that it's just it's you interacting with the chemicals in your own brain. And he was saying, well, to me, finding God was another way of saying finding myself. But as far as I know, he's still a deist. He believes in, or a theist, I should say, believes in God. But he was very open to I know how that sounds, and I know it's perhaps it is just exploring my own mind and not exploring some supernatural deity.
And I've read enough. This all could be placebo type thinking, but the crazy thing is placebos work. And so it's that's where I go, okay, I don't want to believe something that's wrong. Nobody does. But I also want to be the healthiest version of me I can be. And so it's if you find something that you go, wow, this brings out the best in me, I can't prove it either way. It's you can't prove it's not God. I can't prove it is God. I just go, I don't know, it felt meaningful to me. And, that's where I would say to other people, try it. If it's a profound experience for you, awesome. If it's not, okay, you don't have to hang your hat on it, and for me, it's been helpful. And that's what I would say.
But that's great. The thing I would say though is if there's a person that wants to be a fairy, they think they're a fairy. That's fine. Be a fairy, be a Christian, be whatever. The problem is that person who's a fairy stays a fairy. The Christian spreads their word. They try to convince other people. They tell other people about Jesus. It doesn't stay in that convention or in the bedroom or wherever it's at that this person thinks they're a fairy. So, that's the difference, is Christianity actually interacts and, as far as I'm concerned, harms humanity and our society as a whole. That's
I Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with you. There, a lot of Christianity does. I don't think it has to be that way, and I don't think all Christianity is like that. That's why, to me, it's like it's meaningful. Can we offer better versions of Christianity, healthier versions of Christianity than the ones that often, are portrayed or are thought of? Like the fact that if you ask people, "Hey, is hell real?" Just that question, they're all going to go to one dominant theological understanding of hell. That's a problem. I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I didn't even know there were other Christian ways of understanding hell till I was in my 20s. Till I was in my 20s, though. Like,
wow.
And again, I was a pastor's kid. Like, I was deeply embedded in it, and I never heard that. And so to me, it's like, who's going to tell people, yeah, you don't actually have to believe in the guy with the pitchfork that's, burning everybody. Like, that's not your only option. And I think most Christians don't know that. And the moment you tell them that, because I've watched this happen, they get very uncomfortable. And it's like, whoa, if that goes out, then everything goes out. And to me, it's like, no, I think you can explore this. And I would just say, I think every person pushes their beliefs on others directly and indirectly. It's just part of being a human, And so we all believe things that are helpful, and to whatever degree we push those on others and true, that's going to benefit. And we all believe things that are not true. The problem is we don't know what things we believe are not true. Hopefully we'll find out someday. And, those things are damaging. And I think there's tons of damage in Christianity. If I can take a little sliver of it away or add a positive little sliver to it, then I feel like I've made something better.
At least you're trying, right? I mean, somebody's got to try.
To your point, like I can't not try. You know what I mean? I can't sit around and go, well, yeah, that's those Christians are, and for me, it's like the ones, I just turned 40 last week, and I wrote out. Jeff encouraged me to write out 40 like axioms, and
there you go.
One of them I said, much of what we understand as orthodox or heresy is all about who had the power and influence at the time. And to me, I think that's what Christians need to learn. It's like these things that we think, no, this has to be Christianity. Well, it's because there's a pocket of people that had control and they had influence, and they decided that's what gets in.
Weird how that works. The one with the power.
You can peel that back. Right. And you can peel that. It happens today, but you can peel that back and go, oh, there are other ways, And so to me, it's like, who's going to have that conversation? Who's going to explore that? Who's going to open that door? And that's
I'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
I'll have
that.
A lot of
you are having it. You're doing a very good job.
Maybe that's why we have so many denominations, and like the interpretations of Christianity has kind of grown exponentially, because now with the internet and with the fact that the church doesn't have political power, well, I suppose, maybe that's not correct. Maybe the church does have a lot of political power, but
it still does.
They don't get to. Yeah. They don't get to torture you for heresy, at least in the United States right now, the way they used to.
Michael, this is true. I was in seminary getting my master's degree, going through a history of the church, and they were talking about these different people throughout history. And this one guy they're talking about, I'd never heard of him before, and I was like, I really like this guy. I really like the way that he and all this. And then literally right after I have that thought, the professor's like, and the church burned him at the stake. And I'm like, wait, what? And it was this moment I realized, oh, they would have killed me. Like the church would have for sure killed me. And that's a sobering, like, oh, I would have been killed by my own people if I would have lived a few hundred years ago. Which, that's bad. Like there's no good spin on that.
Yeah, no, you can't. There's no coming back from that one.
Right. But thankfully, we don't do that right now. And, I think that doesn't look like Jesus, and that's not what Jesus intended. And so it's like, let's try to offer something better. That's more true and more beautiful.
Nothing wrong with true and beautiful. That's for sure. No, I do talk to a lot of people that are Christians that have different views on hell. I was raised in that very one. We're going to go to hell. My skin's going to be burned off every day to regrow the next day and be burned off again, and all that fun, great stuff they teach you as a kid. So when I talk to Christians now, it's always surprising when they come back. They're like, "Oh no, this is going to happen. It's just a separation. You're going to get poof out of existence, or you're going to go over here. You're going to be on this area here." Weird. Okay. All right. So there's a bunch of different ideas going around about hell right now. It's fun to
Mhm.
learn, and it keeps me on my toes. That's for sure. Because it's never the same between two guests. But yeah.
So, Mike, I thought of another question for you. Like, if you could just wave a magic wand and just make Christianity go away overnight, would that be an easy call, an easy yes for you, or would that be like a difficult, problematic,
Hmm.
ethical question, or what would you do if you had the power?
Well, now I'm thinking about it. I don't know. That's a good
Would that be
question.
more like a Thanos snap?
Yeah,
I think
Thanos snaps. Exactly.
like you
Just
just can
magic wand.
snap
Bam.
Christianity out.
I would go with all religion. I would. I mean, let's go all religion. Let's not just
Sure.
pick
All
one.
religion. Sure. Yeah.
It's tough because there are people out there, and I've spoken to a couple of them that need this. If they don't have this, they're going to be psychopathic, murderer, rapist people. So yeah, I mean, there are some people that do need this, whether it's true or not. So that's a tough question. No, I mean, whew, I want to, but the repercussions, I mean,
Tempting.
there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, yeah. Good question, though. I like that.
Yeah. You can think about it. Get back to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm at
I
this
feel like
point. I want to
if I
say
had that
yes.
power, I would self-destruct with decision fatigue and obviously not do anything, which I guess is a decision in and of itself.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. No, I'm just same thing. Ah, that's a good question though. I like that. I did have a question for Jeremy. Both of you, obviously, but Jeremy, I did specifically. I'm very curious. Is there anything Jeff has said that has been convincing at all? What's the most convincing thing he said to you?
His argument about why Christians should not eat meat, I think, is the most
Vegan. There it is.
compelling
Like
argument.
anybody. Yeah.
Wow. I can't believe what I'm hearing right now. Sorry, keep going.
I would say, there's nothing I've heard Jeff or anyone else, and I read atheists. I try not to just, stay in the Christian lane. There's nothing that I've ever said like, wow, that just rings so true to me. I gotta pursue that. What I really resonate with, and this goes back to what we talked about, is Jeff's posture. Like the way Jeff is exploring and true to himself and willing and courageous enough to say, I don't believe this anymore. I have to go figure this out. Like I'm drawn to that. I admire that. I respect that. And that like intrigues me in the sense of, okay, you believe what you believe so much that you're willing to let go of these things. Right. And I am drawn to that because I think that's, we talk about some of these things like it's really hard, to change your mind on something that you've believed for a while. And when someone does it, I think it's usually a sign of growth, of I used to believe this and then I've worked through something and that's been true in my life. I just haven't grown out of Jesus. And who knows, right? Where I go 10 years from now. I would have, my wife always teases me like, I'm not the guy she married. I'm not at all. Like, I don't believe those things. I've challenged a bunch of my thinking. So I think his posture is what makes the most sense. Usually when I'll ask him a question of like, okay, give me, outside of Jesus, what's a better view of this? I'm usually like, yeah, I don't know. Like that doesn't, it's not super moving to me. But I'm always, there might be something that he says that I'm like, wow, I'm more like, I would say this, I totally get the skepticism against Christianity, against God. I get it. Like you don't have to convince me. I get it. I understand it. I can sit in that space with someone and go, yeah, that makes sense. I would say, okay, so then show me something better. Show me something more true, more beautiful, more compelling. And, in my experience, it usually ends up being, well, we don't know, or it's not that, or, we're going to reduce it. And that's where I just go, okay, maybe.
Man, yeah. So
well, like when you ask,
I'd love to dive in to find out why you find it beautiful, all that fun stuff. So many questions there. Jeremy, you got to come on my show. Jeff, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I don't know. I'm scared. I've heard your show. I don't know if I can keep up with you.
I'm not that scared.
Okay.
I depends on how much coffee I've had, but yes. Sorry.
What Jeremy was saying reminded me of when Jeremy asked me like what is love? Like how would you define love? And like I felt like I did an okay job of kind of like laying out the parameters, but like afterwards I had so much regret of like I should have been more prepared for this question, and like because I'm sure there's a lot of like poets and writers and philosophers who would have thought of like some really nice, like memorable, precise way to say it. And yeah, I kind of just floundered and stuff. And for Jeremy, it's so clean and easy of like love looks like Jesus. You know what's better than Jesus? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you have a good answer for that, Mike? Would you just say love looks like Spider-Man?
Spider-Man's better than Jesus. I mean, but as far as love, I think the Bible describes love very well. Love is patient, love is kind, all those things. But the problem is God doesn't add up to his own definition of love. Mm-hmm. When we find the character of God in the Bible, he is not those things. And there are stories and verses all over the place that just prove that fact. So, yeah, no, that's where I go with it. But Spider-Man, definitely more loving.
Okay,
come
so
on. He wants to save all the bad guys. I mean,
so let me ask this: if you could wrap your head around and believe, and you thought it was true that God was those things. Okay, so if every objection, and I know you've got tons, if somehow if I could wave a magic wand and give you a phenomenal answer to every objection, and I could show you, and you believed it, you went, wow, God really is those things.
Okay,
would you be willing to say, hey, I've got to follow this because God does live up to the hype, or how'd you live up to his own definition, or however you said it?
Yeah, his own definition of love. Yeah.
Would that change it for you?
If you could show me the God that you believe in, this loving, all-loving father figure that wants to be there for me, yeah. If you could prove that and show that to me, if God came down and gave me a big old hug and said, hey, I've actually really wanted to have a relationship with you this entire time, but the devil's been holding me up. I don't know, something. That would be fine. I'd be a believer if he's not this child-killing monster that I'm reading in the Bible. Yeah, I mean, it's different, though. As far as I would believe, I'd probably love the guy, but worship, that's a whole nother level. Praise and worship. Yeah. I have a hard time with that. I think that is so weird. Why do we do that? Why do you guys do that? I don't understand. That's not something I can get behind. No matter how much I like somebody, I can't just Well,
if it makes you feel better, Jesus never asked us to sing to him. So
good. Well, I mean, every knee shall bow, and then at the very end of time, everybody's going to sing praises to God. Everybody. That's Jesus. Everybody's going to sing praise. Even the animals. That's what it says. Even the animals. My dog is going to be singing praises to Jesus, apparently. That's why, from in the beginning to the musical apocalypse, this is the Bible says this. That's the reason behind that.
Iconic.
Talk about poetry, man. He's just rattling it off right now.
Oh man! Oh, if that's poetry, well,
No, but I think I appreciate that answer, and I think that's for me, I have found a way to see God lining up with that, right? And it's taken a whole bunch of work, and a lot of my own journey, and going, yeah, this doesn't, and this doesn't, and what about, and there's still days where I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure about this, and I have my own doubts where I'm like, I don't know, but I just keep going back to it. And so I do think, I think Christians have like a very fake stereotype of atheists of like, atheists just want to go sin and hurt everybody, and it's like, no,
they hate God.
Like right. And it's just like, your answer is so good. It's like, no, you're not against these beautiful images of God. You just don't see God lining up to be that.
Jeremy, last question. Jeff, I got so many questions for you too. But Jeremy, seriously, like my big question is, what do you find to be the most convincing argument for Christianity?
I think I'm drawn to Jesus. And I have reworked like the Christianity I had as a kid is like unrecognizable to me now in my journey. So I have, the hot word is deconstructed so many of the things of the theologies that I thought this like, the hell thing for me was a big one. Like I just,
Uh,
this God is a monster, and I had to just work through that. And the Old Testament was a huge issue for me. And I remember even in undergrad, going to college and asking a professor, like, hey, like, is there a good book that I could read that like how to reconcile what happened in the Old Testament with Jesus? And like he literally recommended a textbook to me that was just like a
huh,
New Testament textbook. And I was like,
huh,
and I remember at that moment, like clearly remembering like something must be wrong with me because like no one else seems to be bothered by these things that bother me. And came to realize like, no, like you can have other ways of understanding this stuff. And at the end of the day, it's Jesus.
hmm,
I am unbelievably drawn to the person of Jesus as depicted, in the Gospels, but also
hmm,
the way that I've experienced Jesus in my own life. And I say that with, hopefully humility to acknowledge I could be wrong. I could be
hmm.
making it up. I could be, overweighting something. And I don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
all I know is like, there's been some profound moments in my life that have felt beyond me, have felt like, wow,
Huh.
that seems like something else was going on. And, as much as like I hear these criticisms against, the Bible, and I go, yeah, I agree. I agree. And yeah, if I didn't think, I mean, I would say this, Michael, if I had your view of God, I wouldn't follow that view of God either. So
Hmm.
I don't fault you. Like, yeah, if I concluded God was the way you've concluded God was, I would have the same
Yeah.
reaction that you have, and I would
I
be an
would hope
atheist,
so.
and I would do a podcast about it, and talk to Christians like me. And, but I have like found like, I think there are other ways of understanding that, and they don't completely resolve
Hmm.
it. And there's still stuff that I go, I don't know. The fig tree is still one of those. I'm like, I don't know. It's just
Yes.
super weird. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's up with the fig tree. But I just find Jesus, like, I can't quit Jesus. I just
Yeah.
am continually drawn to the person of Jesus. So to me, I could be wrong about all my theology. I could be wrong about hell. I could be wrong about free will. I could be, this and that. But like, I really do think Jesus is incredible. And I think
Huh.
there's nothing else I've found that moves me, stirs me,
Hmm.
compels me like the person of Jesus. And so that's not an argument per se, but that's
Yeah.
the thing that like when everything else I've had to rework or like push away or just let go in some sense, like I don't know where I'm going with this. It's always been Jesus that I've gone back to. And, I've gotten dragged through the mud in my ministry career, and
Hmm.
I would say experienced some of the worst that Christianity has to offer. And, had a very painful
Hmm.
departure as I, resigned a position and just said, I can't be a part of this anymore. And in the midst of it, like I never had issue with Jesus. It
Hmm.
was the church and it was Christianity and it was a lot of the theology around it. But I
Hmm.
felt like I don't have to have all that if I can, if I can make sense of Jesus. So to me, it's just, I just keep going back to Jesus. And, that's the theme on our podcast is like, he'll
Yeah.
ask a question. I'm like, all right, spoiler, I'm going to point this to Jesus because I don't know of any other way to be Christian. And if, God
Hmm.
is the monster that he looks like at a surface level reading of the Bible, I want nothing to do with that God. Thankfully, I think there are other ways that you can interpret it. And if you point it to Jesus, I'm in.
Yeah. No, the good Jesus, not the wrathful, vengeful, angry Jesus. But thank you. That's awesome. I get a lot of that. Everybody goes back to Jesus. Um, and of course, you guys don't worship that evil child killing monster. Most Christians don't. They've got this idea of that happy guru, the loving guy who tells you to love your neighbor and love is kind, love is patient, not the drowning kids, punishing children out of jealousy, not that guy. I know you guys don't worship that guy. I mean, that would be a whole nother thing. There are people that worship that guy,
Well,
and
there are. I've met those
they're a little
Christians.
bit different. Yeah, they're a little different.
No, I had
Their tone too.
this is a real story. I had a guy, I
Yeah.
might have shared the story before, but I had a guy when I was a lead pastor. He went to seminary. He's an undergrad, so he's he suddenly has become an expert in all things theology. And I knew it because he threw out a word that no normal Christian uses. He
Hmm.
literally emailed me one day and he's like, "I'm concerned about your hermeneutic."
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you're in Bible college. Nobody talks like this. So I'm like, all right, so let's meet. So we meet. I'll never forget this. And he's like, I just feel like you're very dismissive of the Old Testament because, you just think that you gotta reconcile it with Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, no, I do. And so I said, I don't accept anything in the text that looks contrary to Jesus because I think that's who God really looks like. So I don't accept a service level reading of this, and this. And he's like, well, I have a problem with that. And I'm like, all right, let me just clarify where you're coming from. I'm like, you're not saying that you think you can imagine Jesus, asking for genocide or rape or taking virgins to spoil. Like you're not saying that Jesus could be that, right? And he goes, well, sure he could. And I was like, whoa. There are Christians that believe that. And I just remember going, holy cow. And I just said, hey, I don't know where we go from here because you and I fundamentally, I don't think we're going to see this eye to eye. And I said, I'm glad you're here, but I can't, like he wanted me to preach those texts literally. Like, yeah. And I just said, I can't do that. And I don't think I think there's something else going on there.
Yeah. No, some Christians, the Bible is true. So no matter what's in there, it has to be true and they have to fit it inside that. And if it doesn't, then, well, it meant something different. The context is wrong or God knows best. It's like, well, God is drowning kids. I don't think he knows best at that point. I mean, if you have to go that far, you're no longer doing the right thing in this decision at this moment. Well, but when I see a lot of, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I'm just going to go into another thing. I feel a lot of times I'm going to go back to Elle again, man, great person. Love Elle. But it's the same thing with a lot of Christians and they've got this idea of Jesus and he fits in this little box. And if anything in the Bible or anything in reality doesn't fit that box of Jesus, then it can't be true or it's not real or it was misinterpreted or the hermeneutics are wrong. You're taking it out of context. So it's in there. This is all supposed to be true. These are true stories about God and the things he's done and the things he's said. So if we're going to take this and throw it away, why are we still keeping any of the God part?
So that's a great question. And, I was tempted for a lot. Our last guest encouraged me to throw out parts of the Bible, by the way. So it's funny that you just used that language because I was just encouraged to do
Jeremy.
That. But I would say, okay.
Which part would you get rid of, Jeremy?
Yeah.
No, well, sorry.
That's a different question.
Where do we start?
Where do we start? Numbers 31. That's where I would start. That's my least favorite chapter in the Bible. What I think God did a lot in the Old Testament in particular is allowed people to write the best understanding they had of God at that moment, which is, it goes back to the, why you're letting your kids write it. I don't know why God would do that. Like, it's very problematic unless, and this is where I have to land, unless the act of God doing that and vulnerably saying, I will let you think things of me that are not true, because I value the relationship with you more than you getting this perfectly right. Unless that reveals something about the character of God that God thought was important. Yeah. That's the only way I can go with that, where there is something about God saying, it's important to me that you understand I'm with you, even when you attribute your own ugliness and your own view of the world onto me, because eventually you're going to see what I'm really like. And it's, it's the Sixth Sense ending. It's like, oh, God looks like Jesus. I want to go rewatch the movie. Yeah. Like, I didn't know that before. Well, they didn't know that, right? So progressive revelation, that concept is a wild idea because, Moses is asking like, okay, cool. What do I call you? Like, which God are you? Like, has no idea who he's talking to. We just assume that they all understood all these things. It's like, they didn't. They didn't know what they were doing. God is revealing more and more and more. So I have to go, okay, the fact that God did it that way probably reveals something God thought was important. I wouldn't have done it that way. It seems very risky to do it that way. So what am I supposed to learn from that? And that's where I try to go. I think that today we all who are following God are doing the same thing. Like, we're projecting our own baggage. Like, God is like this. And God's like, no, I'm not really like that. But okay, I want to be in relationship with you, so I'll allow you to think that of me and portray that of me. And I think every preacher who preaches about God does a disservice to God in some sense, right? You're not going to fully capture God. And so to me, I go, there's got to be a reason, because I wouldn't do it that way. So there's got to be something that it reveals about the character of God is the only thing I can conclude.
Well, I mean, it's got to make sense somehow. I mean, we got to put everything in that box and get it to fit in that box. But if it doesn't fit in that box, I'm just going to push it aside. And I'm that pile of I don't knows and that pile of it doesn't make sense starts to add up. I'm going to push the whole thing aside at that point. Like I go to the math book. If I have a math book that confuses me, well, I can read on there and how to do it. But if I have a Bible and it confuses me, I can read on, but it's not going to help me understand why God drowned children. I mean, he says they're evil.
Well, but you're starting with the conclusion God drowned children.
See, that's in his biography.
I think we all got our questions in, or maybe we didn't, but
I got 2 hours worth of questions left, Jeff. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know.
He's a professional at this.
I'm dying to follow up with some questions as well, but I think we'll have to leave it there. Michael, thank you so much for being our guest. This is great. It's so fun to meet you and get to talk to you and everything.
Same.
Obviously plug your website and your book, Bible Says What, anything. Also looking forward to hearing that debate.
Yes.
No idea when that's coming out, but anything else you'd like to plug or?
Yeah, debate eventually. I'll put it out as an episode when it gets here. TheBibleSaysWhat.com is where you can find my book. We can get signed copies there. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Podbean, and I can't think anywhere else you get your podcast. Honestly, but everything's at TheBibleSaysWhat.com. It's where all the merch is at and the messages and all that fun stuff.
Repping his shirt right now. It's good.
Always.
Yeah,
always.
I love
You see the back?
The commitment. I've got my.
You don't have to believe.
It's got the back too.
It's got the. It's okay not to believe. BibleSaysWhat.com.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I love the merch. I'm wearing my Forest and Trees pin right now, though. I'm realizing my hair was blocking it almost the entire time. So.
Wow, you got pins? I'm so jealous. I don't even have pins. I want pins now.
Oh yeah.
We're big time, Michael. We are big time.
We don't have t-shirts though. Not yet, anyway.
I'll make my own. We make them here.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again. Any other closing words from anyone? Everyone feel good about what they had to say. I love this.
I would just also, I would say thank you. I love your posture. I love your spirit. I love your demeanor. I love your intellectual honesty. And I love it. I think it was a great conversation. I think you speak your mind very well.
Thank you.
And it's a pleasure to get to learn from you tonight.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. Absolutely. This has been a blast. I'm going to continue listening to your podcast and catch up on the last episode. No, you guys are great. Great dynamic, great subject matter, great conversations. Keep it up. Don't quit.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. We appreciate it. To our listeners, thanks for listening. We don't know what book we're going to do next, but we'll be back at some point. We'll figure it out. And
Ooh, Joe.
Yeah, Mike, maybe we can have you come on for an episode proper sometime. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Talk to you guys later. Be well.